This is That Guy Jig Sports Podcast. I am him, JIG. Subscribe, rate, and review Amazon, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Check us out. And don't forget about the Instagram at That Guy Jig. But we are a few hours away from draft day, NFL draft day. This is the day that so many athletes have been waiting for their whole life. This moment to get your name called and walk across the stage. The moment you have the opportunity to create generational wealth for your family. Congratulations to everybody that's invited to the draft and that will be participating in the draft. And remember, not all the greatest players were first round picks. Not all these Hall of Fame players came in the first round, second round. Some of these guys came in seventh, eighth. Tom Brady was the last pick. Brock Purdy was the last pick. There are gold in them hills. You just have to be willing to dig and find them. So on today's episode of the NFL, we're going to be talking about the draft. We're going to be talking about team needs. We're going to be talking about who we think the top 10 will draft. Starting with the Chicago Bears, I think it's pretty obvious the first pick will be Caleb Williams. I mean, the Caleb Williams effect is already taking place in Chicago. I mean, they're already rendering new stadiums. They're getting ready for the buzz. They're getting ready for the Hollywood theme quarterback that is coming to save the day in the Windy City. Last quarterback the Bears took first was Justin Fields. I know Bears fans still have that sourness. Well, this is where it gets sweet. This is where you realize that you're eating a Sour Patch Kid and you're not just having a handful of warheads. So look for the Chicago Bears to do a couple of things. They have 4 picks this draft. They have the first and the 9th pick in the first round. Their their team needs are obviously be a QB, a edge, wide receiver, defensive tackle, and offensive line. Now they have already kind of worked on the receiver room when they brought in Keenan Allen. When you bring in Keenan Allen, when you bring DeAndre Swift, you've kind of already worked on your offense. So at this point, I can see the Bears going ahead and drafting Caleb Williams, number 1. And then at the 9th pick, getting them an offensive lineman, defensive lineman. I've seen Byron Murphy from Texas being on there. That's a great defensive lineman for the Chicago Bears. So I can see them jumping back in and drafting a defensive player. I can also see them trading that number 9 pick, getting a couple more assets later on in the draft, and then doing what you do there. So this is a big day for Chicago. This is a very big day for Chicago, just because for so long you've waited. You've waited. You've been watching every team in the division. You've been watching the Vikings emerge. You watched the Packers retool. You watched the Lions make a Super Bowl run. So now we're asking, what about you? What are you going to do, Chicago? I mean, since the Lovie Smith, Devin Hester days, it's been a cold city in the Windy City. It's been rough times. It's been famine and disease. So hopefully that changes today for the Chicago Bears. 4 picks in total, 2 in the first round, 2 in the top 10. We saw what the Houston Texans did with 2 picks in the top 10. Will Anderson and C.J. Stroud completely revamped that team, completely redid that team, changed the culture. A winning culture is now in Houston. So now will the same effect be in Chicago? Time will tell. The Washington Commanders are picking number 2. They have 1 pick in the first round. They have a total of 9 picks. The team needs are QB, offensive tackle, edge, and a tight end. I think this is pretty obvious. You go ahead and you get Jaden Daniels. I don't understand what the big rush about J.J. McCarthy is if we're talking about skill set. If we're talking about skill at the quarterback position compared to Jaden Daniels, compared to Drake May, compared to Michael Penix, J.J. McCarthy, and of course Caleb Williams. But J.J. McCarthy is the 5th best quarterback in terms of skill and numbers that he put up in college. Now, if we're talking about the biggest factor of it all, the win factor, then he's number 1. No quarterback in this draft has won more than J.J. McCarthy. But I ask you, why do we trade up to draft Brock Purdy? I'm going to say that again. Why do you trade up into the top 5 Or why do you use your top 5 pick to draft Brock Purdy? He's going to be there later on. He's going to be there later on. And I get it. Brock Purdy is an elite game manager. But you don't waste a lottery pick on that. You can get a game manager later on. So when I look at the Washington Commanders and I think it's between Jayden Daniels and Drake May. J.J. McCarthy is one of those picks that I could see, but I could also see a reach. I could also see a reach for this team. This is one of those teams that I've said earlier in the year, there's a quarterback away. They're a quarterback away from greatness. They have the weapons in place. They just got Austin Eckler to solidify that running back room. So I think overall that this is a good team that just needs a good quarterback, a solid quarterback. And I think the 49ers' success with Brock Purdy and having all that talent around them is kind of fool's gold. Because as I sit here and I say, you don't draft Brock Purdy in the top 10, you don't draft him when you can draft him later, that takes away from the legitimate skill set that Brock Purdy does have. Because Brock Purdy is still Brock Purdy. We know what he can do, and we know he still threw for almost 4,000 or over 4,000 yards. So he does have skill. But I just don't want teams to fall into this, well, if they can do it, I can do it. That's not always true, folks. That's not always true. The 49ers, in a sense, you could say, got very lucky. I mean, how many quarterbacks have the 49ers went through in the past 5 years before they finally landed on their guy? This is a team that's had their fair share of quarterbacks. But as I look at the Commanders, I think the only option at this point is Jayden Daniels. I think you take Jayden, if he's there at number 2, which he should be, I think you take Jayden Daniels. I can see a Drake May. I can see it. There's a lot of hype behind the guy. But me personally, I'm going Jayden Daniels. The New England Patriots are number 3. They have 1 first-round draft pick of the number 3 overall. They have 8 overall in the draft. Team needs quarterback, wide receiver, offensive tackle, and corner. Now, this has been a team that's been linked to a lot of trades. They've been linked to a lot of trades, a lot of moving back in the draft, a lot of we'll wait till next year when those quarterbacks come out. Let's just get a good roster with good quarterbacks. With good receivers, good running backs, offensive line. Let's get all this solidified before we bring in a quarterback and get the hell beat out of him for 17 games. His confidence is in the dirt. Next thing you know, we're asking, is he a bust? So let's just go ahead and get everything else. Now, the teams like the Vikings, like the Giants, these are teams that have been interested in that number 3 pick. These are teams that are supposedly calling for that number 3 pick. Me personally, if Jayden Daniels is available, if Washington drafts Drake May, I would take Jayden Daniels. If Jayden Daniels is not available, then you go ahead and you just draft the best available, or you trade out of the first of the top 10, and you get a couple picks on that back end, and then you get some guys you want. There's going to be a big push for defensive players this year because they got to stay caught up with these offenses. We see the rule changes that are coming down that are in favor of the offense. We see all this stuff. So the defense has to compete. So there's going to be I think there's going to be more defensive players selected this year than what people want to believe. I think there's going to be more defensive players selected in the first round than people believe because you have to keep up with these offenses. You have to keep up with these offenses, and there's some great defensive players out there. So if I'm a team like New England, if Jayden Daniels is not available, if it goes Caleb Williams, Jayden Daniels, and Drake May is left on the board, then I say you trade out of there. Jayden Daniels is the guy you want. I say you trade out of there, get out of the top 10, get some more assets, and figure out what you can do. Because from there, you can always draft skilled players. You can always draft offensive line, which is probably the most important position as far as a group of offensive linemen. It's very important and imperative to the success of a football team. So if I'm the Patriots, that's what I'm doing. You know, I can see them taking somebody, but no need to rush it. There's no need to rush it. The Arizona Cardinals. Now, this is a team that I've told you that I still see Kyler Murray ending up a Minnesota Viking. The Vikings are very, very aggressive right now at trying to get a quarterback in place. I don't think you can afford to go with a rookie quarterback. I just don't. I don't see it. Because if you go with the rookie quarterback in Minnesota and it doesn't pan out, you have a lot of luxurious cars sitting in a driveway with no driver. You go and get a guy like Kyler Murray. You go and get a guy like Kyler Murray, and the game changes. Now, the Cardinals have 2 first-round picks, 4 and 27, 11 total picks. They need a wide receiver, edge, defensive tackle, cornerback, and running back. Now, if you're going to run with Kyler Murray, then you go ahead and you draft Marvin Harrison Jr., I think. I don't think this is much of a question. I don't think there's much of a question. But I'm going to tell you this. If there's going to be a move made in the top 5, it's these guys down there in the desert. It's going to be them. I can feel it in my fingers. I feel it in my bones. So Marvin Harrison Jr., this is all contingent on if you are keeping Kyler Murray. Then you go ahead and you draft you a wide receiver. You get him a new wide receiver. You come back in the first round and you're probably going to get you a defensive tackle or an edge. You're probably going to go defense. You might go cornerback. I don't know. But one of those 3 you have to go in that later first round. After that, running backs are a dime a dozen. You can get a good running back in the 3rd or 4th round. It won't be that hard to do. This year's draft class for running back is all right. Next year's class is going to be a lot better. But as far as finding somebody suitable and finding someone that you could probably put a project behind, 100%. 100% there's somebody in this draft class for the Arizona Cardinals. So I'm very interested to see what these guys do at number 4. Because do they hit the complete rebuild button? Or do they stick with Kyler Murray and they try to get him some help? This is going to be interesting. Los Angeles Chargers come in at the 5th pick. They have 9 total picks. They need a wide receiver, offensive tackle, corner, defensive line, and offensive guard. Now, I don't see the Chargers using another first-round pick on a wide receiver. This would make 2 straight years of having a wide receiver as your first pick. They still got Johnson from TCU last year, and he had a tough year. Very, very tough year. I can see them going ahead and picking up Joe Alt from Notre Dame, getting that offensive tackle shored up, getting that offensive line shored up. If you have a good offensive line, you can draft you a solid running back or even sign a solid running back, and they will make production. The Chargers have done that. They got J.K. Dobbins. They got Gus Edwards. They pretty much have the old Ravens backfield over there, so they have 2 solid running backs. Maybe not great, maybe not the best in the division, but they're solid. You have 2 solid running backs. If J.K. Dobbins can stay healthy, if he can stay healthy, they'll be all right. You get this offensive line. You get a run game, a solid run game, so Justin Herbert isn't getting his head blown off because defenses are just pinning their ears back because they know they're going to throw the ball 30, 40 times a game. You can get a wide receiver later on, 2nd, 3rd, 4th round. We know whenever those draft picks come up. But as for right now, I think their first-round pick is easy. It's not even close. It's not even a discussion in my book. The first-round pick of the Chargers has to be Joe Alt, offensive tackle. I just don't see another way. The New York Giants coming in number 6. They have 6 total picks. Need wide receiver, quarterback, offensive tackle, corner, and defensive tackle. I think this is pretty obvious. I think they are probably, if Drake May is gone, if Michael Penix is gone, not Michael Penix, Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, if those 3 are gone, then I think they go ahead and draft a wide receiver. I think they either get Romeo Duzé or Malik Neighbors. I think they're probably going to go with Romeo Duzé. Malik Neighbors had a crazy smear campaign go on this year where his character was in question so much. It was in question so much, I think he's going to fall a lot later to a better team, and this is going to be something that works out in his favor. Because there was a terrible report about him at LSU and them staying at big cities and him not being able to focus in big cities, so he's going to fall in the draft. But if you're the Giants, do you draft a wide receiver for Daniel Jones and give him an actual weapon? Or do you just say, screw the Daniel Jones project, let's draft a quarterback and let's get this transition period going? Let's go ahead and get this transition period going on where we move on from Daniel Jones. And I think that's very possible. But if we're talking what JIG would do, I'm drafting a wide receiver, giving Daniel Jones this one last season because you're going to suck regardless. That's the whole thing about the Giants. You're not going to be good regardless. If you draft a wide receiver, it's not going to change this record. It's not going to put you, number 2 in the NFC East. You're still going to be down there in the depths of hell. You're still going to have to do some more things. So go ahead and draft your wide receiver and build up this weaponry for whatever quarterback you do choose to bring in. Weaponry is huge, folks. You can't bring guys into these offenses with no weapons. It just never ends up well. Number 7, we got the Tennessee Titans. They got 7 overall picks. Team needs offensive tackle, defensive tackle, edge, wide receiver, and linebacker. I think these guys go offensive tackle. They've lost a few. They've lost a few offensive tackle. They had one retire. I think they go offensive line. I think they build this offensive line for Will Levis. They have wide receivers in DeAndre Hopkins and Calvin Ridley. They just paid a lot of money. They have a good tight end. They have 2 solid running backs in Tony Pollard and Spears. So I think this offense will be all right. They got to get some offensive line help. They got to get an offensive line. It's a very important position. It's a very important position. If you have a terrible offensive line, it slows everything down. Look at the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals could have a Super Bowl right now if they had a solid offensive line. But they don't. And they're still working on it. And we'll see what's to be done in old Cincinnati. The Atlanta Falcons have had a busy offseason. They're at the number 8 pick. They need an edge, a corner, defensive line, and offensive tackle. Listen, you're never not going to need offensive linemen, folks. It's just going to come down to the point of how early do I want to take it? How early do I want to hit this need? Because like I said, you're always going to need offensive linemen. There's never going to be a day where a team's like, you know what? We have plenty of offensive linemen. That's not how football works. If there is a position that need depth, it is offensive line, offensive line, offensive line. So you'll always hear me say, when in doubt, just pick a lineman. No one can ever be mad at a team for drafting an offensive line because you got to have a good offensive line for this to go anywhere. Coming in at 10, New York Jets. They need an offensive tackle, wide receiver, tight end, safety, and running back. Well, we should just ask Aaron Rodgers what they're going to do. Because depending on Aaron Rodgers depends on what they do. I think they should go ahead and get him another wide receiver. Get him another wide receiver, especially if you don't have a plan on trading for one. Because if Malik Nabers is here at 10, I think you take Malik Nabers. I think if Malik Nabers is there at 10, you take Malik Nabers and you walk away from the situation feeling all right. If he's not there, then what do I say? When in doubt, pick an offensive lineman. Pick an offensive lineman. And now the Vikings have the 11th pick, and this is going to be the last one we do because this is an interesting one because they need a quarterback, a defensive tackle, offensive guard, and a corner. Now we know that they are in the market for a quarterback. But let's say they don't trade up. Let's say everything goes like how it is. You're looking at McCarthy, Penix, Nix. So at that point, I think they have to trade up. Because, like I said, when you have a team that has Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson as pass catchers, and you got Darren Saul on the offensive line, you just brought in Aaron Jones, and now you also have Ty Chandler at running back. This is a great window for the Minnesota Vikings. Trade up or draft a quarterback or go trade for one of these quarterbacks that are available. They may not be publicly available, but they're available, folks. They're 100% available. But once again, congratulations to everyone who has made it to this stage. This is a big stage to be. Congratulations to you. I hope every fan base you get the player that you want. Be wary, though. I will say this. Be wary of putting yourself on camera and reacting to your team's draft pick. I've seen a lot of people mad about Patrick Mahomes being picked. I've seen people being mad that Josh Allen was picked over Josh Rosen. Don't be those people. Use your mind, not your heart. This is That Guy Jig Sports Podcast. I am him, JIG. Subscribe, rate, and review, and tell a friend to tell a friend. But most importantly, I appreciate the listen. Subscribe, rate, and review. I am him, JIG. Draft day. Peace.